Masterpiece Apocryphal History presents Jack and Marc return from their Muskeg Tundra Casino Bathhouse Enterprise. So how about our first customer?
Big Barnaby Wet Legs?
Yeah, he just lived out on the Tundra.
Why did they call him Wet Leg?
When he would go fishing, he wore those waders. He put the water in the boots and then would go jogging in order to strengthen his legs so that he could stand in raging currents.
Did they call him Sloshy?
Oh yeah, actually it was Slosh Legs Fuckhead. I think he preferred Barnaby Wet Legs. He preferred that. And he would always show us his muscular thighs.
You know, he'd take off those big sloshing hip waders and then he'd kind of flex his thighs. He knew he was showing off for the ladies.
His caribou skin girlfriend, Effigy.
Effigy, yeah.
Also, he always carried his entire water supply with him in his boots. The hip waders, all the water he needed, he'd just stick a straw down the front of his hip waders and drink.
But then he used to go fly fishing with those hip waders.
I know, he was always out there running around trying to catch flies. Once he captured some flies, then wanted to start some sort of fly circus, because ever since he heard about the flea circus, he became obsessed with creating a fly circus.
Right, but they're not easy to train flies.
No, but he felt determined. Besides, he had a lot of time on his hands. Thought maybe if he had enough flies on his body, he would be able to elevate somewhat. He wouldn't sink into the muskeg as much. Because they get tiresome, you know, when your feet keep sinking into the muskeg.
Well, especially if jogging in Muskeg with those water-filled hip waders. We considered him friends, and we wanted to tell him, listen, he didn't really...
I know, we should have been upfront about it, you know. He was a big guy.
Yeah.
Like he was 7'8"?
Oh, he could have played in the NBA.
And we told him, he said he didn't want to go back to civilization, but we said, hey, you could make a lot of money being in the NBA. Finally, when the bush plane that landed there, yeah, there was old...
Ironside Callahan? He and Barnaby Wet Legs, they became the best of friends, didn't they?
Yeah, oh yeah, they did. And they like to go out singing in the tundra and drinking that fine brew that we finally managed to create out of muskeg and hip wader water.
What did we call it?
We called that big fucking hole in your head. Yeah, we even had labels made.
The bottle was shaped like a head and there was a hole right through it?
Yeah, we had to make the heads out of muskeg mud. They had to give us our first containers.
Hey, do you remember when Barnaby Wet Leg met that real girl?
Big Ethel Monsoon.
She was pretty big boned.
Yeah, she was enormous. Gotta say, they really did hit it off. They finally found someone as eccentric as they were.
Ironside Callahan, he didn't take that too well.
Now he started getting jealous because Big Barnaby Wet Legs and Big Ethel Moosehead, they would go off onto the tundra and...
Ethel Big Monsoon, not Moosehead.
Well, Moosehead was her middle name, Ethel Moosehead Monsoon.
Yeah, Big Ethel Moosehead Monsoon and Big Barnaby Wet Legs. And what was his other name again that you said?
Slosh Legs Fuckhead. Well, that was people who didn't like him. It was just like with Big Ethel Monsoon, they called just Big Ethel Shitstorm. Because she'd come into town and, you know, they were pretty rowdy, those two. When they go into town, they'd like to let off some steam.
Right, and in a literal sense.
You know, after being out on the tundra a long time, they like to have their steam bath. So they'd bring in big piles of rocks and just to start, you know, get those things heated up. They didn't care where they were. Remember, they took over the Baskin-Robbins ice cream shop and turned it into a steam bath. And they're in there getting all rollicky amorous. It was just chaos. Of course, people, they get angry and pissed off, and then they start calling them names. I mean, that's how they got Big Slosh Leg Fuckhead and Big Ethel Shitstorm. They got those names because they ruined all the ice cream and started a steam bath in the middle of summer. They had very large pores.
They had black flies coming out of those pores because they were so big.
They were sweating black flies, but they were immune to them. Black flies would bite them and the black flies would die because they built super high immunities. And then there was those Russian scientists who wanted to capture them and try and get blood samples and figure out how did they have this immunity to black flies.
Wow, those Russian guys, those government spies, they didn't know what they were up against.
Oh,
right?
they didn't have a chance. And then the Russians actually kidnapped Big Barnaby Wet Legs, brought him down into the bowels of that Russian icebreaker. Of course, Big Ethel Monsoon went in pursuit of her lover, Big Barnaby Wet Legs, and then they started one of their famous steam baths right in the middle of the icebreaker. Everyone thought the icebreaker was actually on fire. It was so hot that no one could stay on board.
People got sick and they were jumping off.
Fled, they jumped off, and then Big Barnaby Wet Legs and Big Ethel Shitstorm Monsoon, they took over the icebreaker.
I thought they drove it to Chicago.
Well, they had to get out to the main ocean, yeah, and they went down the coast, and then they went and landed there, and there was another monsoon shitstorm right there.
Oh, that's a couple you made?
Well, Big Ethel Moosehead Monsoon Shitstorm and Barnaby Wetlegs Fuckhead, so they call them Monsoon Fuckhead.
And people were always getting it backward. They'd get pissed off. You got the order wrong?
Oh yeah, they didn't like that. That was like McCartney-Lennon, and instead of Lennon-McCartney, it didn't sound right.
Oh boy, and then they just ripped apart the city.
Of course, National Enquirer picked them up because they figured no one would believe them. This was truly happening. These two enigmas, these two larger-than-life beings were coming into town.
You remember Hurricane Sandy and all the water that rushed up? That wasn't Hurricane Sandy that did. That was because they had fallen in the water, and that created a backwash.
Well, they took claim for it. They actually would just go around and take claim for any disaster that occurred, because they thought it up to their street cred. But it was good for us because they got their start at our Muskeg Casino bathhouse, and then they returned because they're very big romantics.
Right. Well, yeah, you can't keep lovers apart because of the gravitational attraction between the two.
It was their mass. They both were equal masses.
Could get little things orbiting them.
Yes, well, they did. They had all those National Enquirer reporters. And then when they came to visit us again on a romantic second honeymoon, then all the National Enquirer orders and all the rag newspapers of the day, from the Toronto Sun to the London Sun, and they all followed them out to our Muskeg gambling joint.
And then that's when we made our big money.
Oh boy, did we. We made tons of money, didn't we?
Yeah.
We had to go fish. We set up a roulette wheel with a hat and some marbles. That really did it for us, because then we made front page National Enquirer news.
We have concluded our broadcast schedule for today. Good night.